How's everybody doing?
Great.
I told everybody here in person, this is my first mask presentation event in person, so this is a little bit different than sitting in my living room at home. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Marcus. I'm the Director of Graduate Admission here at Roger. And this is Courtney Tran, who works in our office. She's our Assistant Director, so you'll be talking to us a fair amount if you decide to apply. You, of course, probably know Dr. Verano. He's the chair of our... You prefer Sean? This is Sean Verano. I don't know. You know how it goes. Professor Verano will be talking a little bit about the program here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about admissions and financial aid as we go along. If you have any questions, certainly the folks online, bear with us because we'll be dealing with the Zoom and things, but if you have questions, just enter them in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer them for you. But appreciate your time. So I'm just going to pass it over to Sean. Go from here.
Well, welcome everybody. We're here primarily to talk about the 4+1 program, which is what most of you will be interested in applying for. But before we talk about that, just so you know, the only option in the master's is not just the 4+1. While that is an option for you if you decide that you don't want to start the master's program as an undergraduate student, you can always complete your studies here and then matriculate after that. So, but obviously we're here for most of you, I'm assuming, who are interested in that program. So I'm Sean Verano. I know most of you. I'm a professor here. I am the graduate director of the master's program. We're going to talk a bit about that program itself. Now is the right time to start this conversation because advising is starting up, right? So I'm trying to figure out if you're a junior and you're interested in the 4+1, who here physically is a junior? Okay. What you want to be doing, and for those students that are online, if you're a junior, you really want to make a decision if you're going to apply to the 4+1 program ASAP, because when we start in advising for the spring, so not now, but you're making advising decisions for this, when you start advising season in the spring, you really want to have a sense as to if you're taking graduate classes in your senior year. So you really need to kind of get that ball rolling. If you're a freshman or sophomore at this point, great to be here. Never too early to start that conversation. All right. So let me see if my little. Can you just click on the PowerPoint slide and then my thing should work. All right. All right. So as you may know or you may not know, the Masters of Criminal Justice here is one of the first graduate programs at Roger Williams. So we're really happy to be part of not only the university itself, but really helping to institutionalize a graduate culture among students and across the university here. It is part of the School of Justice Studies. School of Justice Studies it has the undergraduate curriculum, our grad programs. We have the Justice Training and Research Institute, which does create a lot of opportunities, particularly among graduate students that want to do research. Really opens up that option there. We have several students who have done data collection and research at the Institute. The program itself is a 36 credit hour. That's a pretty standard credit hour load at the graduate level for a non-clinical, what we say master's program. That means that there's 12 courses. The program is really flexible in that it's designed to, one of the intentional decisions we've made in recent years is to move in a direction of hybrid courses, which traditionally means we do a week in class, a week online, week in class, week online. And that is really the best balance of accommodating students' working schedules and giving students the needed flexibility that you need while keeping that personal touch. Now, if you decide to enroll in the program, we do also offer it 100% online. So the classes you take in the hybrid model, you can take those same courses 100% online. And what's great about it, the flexibility is such that if you decide midstream, let's say you apply to the 4+1, and you take graduate classes as a senior, and then you have the fortune of getting a job, but you want to stay in your master's degree, you can switch to 100% online at any time, right? So we really offer maximum flexibility. So the real question is, and certainly this is no small undertaking or certainly no minor cost, right? So why a master's program? There's little doubt that from a long-term earning potential, a master's degree or a graduate degree is really going to become the industry standard. For many federal jobs, it may either be a requirement or it counts as experience. So for some jobs, let's say you need a minimum of 2 years experience or 3 years experience. A master's degree or a graduate degree will fill those qualifications for certain numbers of years of experience. So while in some cases it's required, in many other cases it's definitely a leg up. Certainly in terms of the career growth, right? And I know it's hard as an undergraduate student, but to think through your plans 5 or 10 years post-graduation. But it's one of those things that, when you think about your education, you want to think about your education not just for what you need today, but what you're going to need down the road. And one of the things that is particularly attractive, and I know we all went to grad school, and I'm slightly older not much, than Marcus and Courtney. It's really that decision, like, do you do graduate school right out of school or as part of school, or do you wait down near the line? And the only thing that I will tell you is that it gets exponentially harder to do the more complicated that your post-graduation life gets, right? So the idea is when you get a full-time job or you start, you get married, you have children, or your professional life takes on more serious obligations, it gets harder. And certainly, when you talk about for many of our students who are still trying to find that first job or, that first serious job out of college, it's really a way of giving you a leg up during the application process, during the early stages of your career search, that really give you that leg up on the career field, if you will. And certainly from an entry-level job, particularly whether it's policing or not policing, the reality is that demands of the public safety sector are becoming more and more, right? And certainly from a long-term sort of institutionalization of this sort of field, there is really definitely a demand for people with higher education at this point. The program as a whole, again, as I had said, is 36 credit hours. That is 12 courses. Again, pretty typical of most master's degrees, certainly in criminal justice. We really try to be as flexible as possible. One of the strengths of our program is that we cater to both what we call a traditional audience, and many of you are sort of our traditional students, but we also cater to a professional audience. People who are working full-time as a police officer, as a correctional officer, as a research analyst, people in the field. And I know when I went to grad school, and I had maybe worked for 18 months, so I had a little bit of work, but I was still relatively young. And I'm going to tell you, one of the benefits of my master's degree was that intersection of young scholars and experienced professionals. And I'm going to tell you, the young scholars or the more traditional students brought a lot to the table, but so do those experienced professionals. And that really creates a maximum opportunity to learn from each other. So because our program does cater to people that are working shift work and are working crazy hours, we try to be as flexible as possible. So you can go full-time, part-time. Some programs are heavy what we call cohort-based. So when you come in as a cohort or as a first-year group of students, they really want you to stay on track and finish at a certain pace. We really encourage that. But at the end of the day, students can speed up or slow down their graduate program as much as they want. The only constraint on that is financial aid, right? If you're getting financial aid, then you might need to meet certain credit thresholds in order to continue to qualify for financial aid. We do have a thesis track or a non-thesis track option. Now, I won't really spend too much time on that here because that's a longer advising kind of discussion. But in short, what I say to students is that if you're absolutely certain, or you even think you might want to go on to a PhD program, do the thesis track. If you absolutely are certain that you don't, then you might want to not do the thesis option. 90% or more of our students do not do the thesis option. Now, if that wasn't sufficiently money, I knew I was never getting a PhD and going to a doctoral program. Of course I did, right? So, and I got to tell you that doing a master's thesis is a different kind of experience. And so I don't want to get too lost in that, but that's an option. If you decide you want to do a thesis, so how our program works, there's 12 courses, 6 are required classes, 6 are elective courses. If you do the thesis option, you actually take 4 elective courses, so that's why it says 4 to 6, and you take the equivalent of 2 courses as your thesis. Okay, so again, that stuff, that probably sounds very confusing. It's not as confusing, but the decision to do a thesis versus non-thesis is an important conversation to have. The cost is $984 per credit. You know, we feel like when you look at the marketplace, it's a very competitive price point to be at for the credit hours. And certainly for the 4+1 students, not only is the tuition a competitive tuition, but there's some real, which we'll cover in a minute, there's some value added to the 4+1. Financial aid options, we're primarily through just student loans. We at this point don't offer extensive amount of special funding or scholarships for graduate students. Most of that is really at the undergraduate level. In terms of the curriculum, again, as I had said, that there's 6 required classes and anywhere from 4 to 6 elective courses. Now, when you look at the courses at the graduate level, what you tend to see is at the graduate level, you take a much deeper dive into a lot of the topics. So there will be, at times, some overlap between the undergraduate and the graduate program to the degree that the undergraduate courses are a couple of inches deep and a half a mile wide. These are several feet deep in a much more narrow scope. You really get into a lot of the more advanced issues. This is, I would say, the required courses are pretty typical of what I would say the better graduate programs are. You have a theory course, you have a research methods course, you have a statistics course. The criminal justice overview is sort of intro to criminal justice, but at the graduate level, you'll talk a lot more about discretion and the role of discretion, critical analysis of the criminal justice system. Crime and public policy has both sort of this policy lens to it, but also this management lens. A lot of what we talk about in criminal justice system is not just law, but how that law is operationalized through policy. And then again, theory and stats. In terms of the elective courses, what you'll see here is that we have a real wide range of elective courses. One of the strengths that we have here at Roger Williams is that our graduate program, in terms of the Masters of Criminal Justice, since it's under the School of Justice Studies, we also have other graduate programs under the School of Justice Studies. We have the Masters of Cybersecurity, Public Administration, Leadership. And if students want to take courses in those programs as elective courses, I'm certainly willing to have that conversation. And we're an interdisciplinary science. So the idea that you might want to take, one of the courses that is probably one of the best grad courses that we have in our curriculum here, which based on your age and experience, you may not think sounds really relevant, but is grant writing, right? How to write grants. And that's in public administration, I think. I'm going to tell you, there is no more important class that you could take, right? Even though it's not probably the sexiest course. The public policy world works via grants. So you can walk into an employer tomorrow and say, listen, I don't have a ton of experience, but I know something about writing grants. That actually is a real value added. So the point is, with the programs we have in the School of Justice Studies, since they're all housed within the School of Justice Studies, we're willing to allow as much flexibility as possible for you to develop the experiences through the curriculum that best fit your future interests. Again, if you decide to do the thesis option, you would take 4 elective courses and 2 thesis classes, which are the equivalent of 6 credits. So right now, we have one graduate student who's doing a master's thesis, and she's doing a bang-up job. And early on when she and I had the discussion, it was really about her interest in her PhD program, right? And I had told her, I said, if you're seriously interested in getting your PhD, not only would you be so much less competitive in the PhD programs for your acceptance and your funding and other things like that, but you're doing yourself a disservice because PhD programs are very different than master's program, which are very different than undergrad. So she and I had a long conversation. She's doing a bang-up job on her thesis. She's already admitted to a PhD program with just substantial amounts of funding and things like that. So that thesis becomes, it plays a lot of different roles. And again, don't get overwhelmed by that. We can have a conversation as that time approaches.
If I could just throw one thing in. One of the nice things about being able to dabble in some of these courses in whether it be public administration or leadership or cybersecurity, we have certificates in all those areas. So part of your electives can fulfill another credential while you're here. And depending on how many classes they are, you could get a master's and a certificate without taking any additional courses. So you could do a CJ master's with a public management certificate or a leadership certificate or digital forensics, which is really helpful now. We have a lot of police officers that come back that want public management or they want something in cybersecurity, especially when they're trying to get off the beat in the latter part of their career. They want to do something a little bit more advanced. So you can get these certificates as part of the master's and not pay any more money or take any additional time to be baked into your existing degree. So it's a great option if you want.
Yeah, and that's the real value of having them co-located within the School of Justice Studies, is that the administrative headache to make those things happen is just much easier. In terms of the approaches to finishing the program, there is again the 4+1 option. And how that would work is you would take two, well, they're not necessarily online. They could be the hybrid courses, but you take 2 graduate courses as a senior. So how that works is you apply for acceptance into the program your junior year. We really favor some of our stronger students. I mean, there is a GPA requirement. That sounded really elitist, and I didn't mean it to come off that way. But in order to be accepted to the 4+1 program, we like to see students performing higher at the undergraduate level, because, you take a heavier load as an undergraduate. So taking, 4 classes plus a 5th graduate course is a lot, right? Graduate classes they're just higher amount of work and they're more intensive, as you would expect, okay? So students who are accepted take a graduate course fall and spring of their senior year. So what happens is that 2 of those graduate requirements also fill undergraduate requirements. So you're not paying any extra for those graduate courses. That's how you're able to complete the program in the +1. So you take 2 graduate courses as a senior. There's no additional tuition for those, and there is the possibility for some additional funding at the undergraduate level in particular, and potentially at the graduate level, but that's not exactly certain at this point. And then you would take post-graduation, so you take 2 courses as a senior, 2 classes over the summer between undergraduate and graduate, and then 4 and 4 classes in the fall, 4 classes in the spring. I have to tell you though, taking 4 graduate classes is intensive. So at the master's level, a full-time student is considered 9 credit hours. So you know how at the undergraduate level, 12 is the minimum, 15 credits is the standard. At the master's level, 9 credit hours is pretty typical for a full-time student. So if you're +1, you're taking 4 courses, just know you have a full-time commitment to that. It's going to be hard to work in that +1 year, work full-time and take 4 courses, okay? And then we have the 4+1 for external students, but that's really not our audience here. So the advantage of coming in to doing the 4+1 is you can finish the master's program in that additional year. If you don't apply to the 4+1, you can finish our master's degree as a traditional master's student in anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years, depending upon how aggressively you want to, complete the curriculum. We do offer regularly anywhere from 3 to 4 graduate courses over the summer. So that's one of those ways where students can really speed up the completion of their program. But again, for full-time, non-4+1 students, I'd encourage students to think of a full-time master's load as 3 courses. What I will tell you is we've never approved a student taking 5 graduate courses in a semester. It's the kiss of death, okay? It's just too much work. So that, the typical time is going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 years.
Actually, before we leave that, I want to underscore, because I think everybody here in the room and everybody online are all internal students. So we can cater this as far as the 4+1 opportunity. Okay. I think most of you, you're all over the map. Any seniors here? I think we have a few seniors online. If you're a senior, we can try to make something work for you in the spring, so you're not out of the loop here. Anybody else, if you can take those 2 classes senior year, you're saving about $6,000 doing that. So that's a pretty good chunk of change, right? So you think all of you are getting a $6,000 baked in scholarship essentially. On top of that, if you have a 3.3 or higher, we're going to guarantee you additional scholarship money. So when you get your cumulative GPA, and even if that changes, so if you're applying in junior year and you've got a 3.2, but then by the time you graduate, you've got a 3.5, we're going to give you the scholarship because you got up to a 3.5. So we'll adjust that as we go. We'll always adjust up, we won't adjust down. So if you're at a 3.5 when you apply to us and then you have a 3.4 when you graduate, we'll keep the 3.5 scholarship. So we try to honor that. So for the top student, if you get a 3.8 or above, and we've only had a couple usually, but that's $4,500 in addition to the $6,000 you've saved. So you've knocked about a third of your degree you've saved right off the bat. For most of you, you'll probably be in a $1,500 to $3,000 range if you're above a 3.3. So we'll get a scholarship to you in addition to that savings. The other nice thing that a lot of folks don't think about is when you're doing a 1-year program, most masters and CJ are 2-year programs. So you're getting out of the workforce a year sooner, you're able to earn a salary a year sooner. So that's money in your pocket that you otherwise wouldn't be getting by going to another one of these programs. So you're saving time and efficiency by doing that, and you have more money in your pocket in the long run, you're paying back loans and all of that. So there's a reality that master's education, you have to take federal loans in many cases. I mean, some of you may have other resources, and that's great. But a lot of students end up taking some federal loans to support their studies, and that's okay. But if we can get you out sooner, you can pay those back more easily over time. So we really try to make it as affordable as possible. And for some of you, you'll knock a third of that cost off right at the beginning.
And then again, the timing of it is such, and again, I know it's hard to think about getting a full-time job when you're still a student. But like, I'll tell you from my own experience, I actually had a pretty good job right out of college. I worked for the federal government, I worked for the Department of Justice. And when I went to grad school, I decided to quit my job and go back to school full-time, because I didn't want to string my master's degree over 3 or 4 or 5 years. I have several siblings who went to law school, and I saw them working full-time, and I'm like, I don't want to do that, right? It was just too long. So it really is about the timing of things too. And again, the challenge of doing grad school as your life gets substantially more complex as you get older, it gets harder and harder. And I can tell you that because I deal with them, half of our students are working professionals. And so I see them sometimes take, believe it or not, 7, 8 years to finish their master's degree because they can only take a class here and there based on their either professional obligations or their family obligations. And again, if there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm not going to go in all these different, options, but the point is this: one of the important implications is the only thing that you might have to think about is your financial aid if you're getting loans, right? So in terms of how many courses that you're going to take, that's the big thing. If you're getting loans, what is the?
You need 2 classes at a time.
You need 2 classes in any given semester in order to qualify for federal financial aid. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So here would be the typical matriculation plan for a student. That again is in our 4+1. In your senior year, I recommend that if that you take 1 course, again, one of the required courses in the fall and spring of your senior year. As Marcus had said, if you're currently a senior and you otherwise are eligible, or you think you have the ability to get into the 4+1 program, let us know sooner than later. We can expedite your application process. And the important thing is you still have choices as a senior, but what we have to do in order for you to fully take advantage of the benefit of the 4+1 is to schedule you for 2 graduate courses for the spring. That's a possibility. And if you have any interest in that, don't hesitate to reach out. So the typical student would take a class in the fall and spring of their senior year. Again, that could be a hybrid or online class. Most of our required classes are taught in the hybrid format. So a week in class, week online. You would then take 2 courses in the summer post-graduation. I always recommend at least 1 year required class. So 1 required and 1 elective, or 2 required depending on what we're offering. And then 4 classes in the fall, 4 classes in the spring of your +1 year. And again, this is all about the master's thesis too. So if you wanted to do that, we would have that as a separate conversation. Again, I'm not going to go into this too much, but this would be the standard for many of you. And then if you wanted to deviate from that, either you don't want to do the 4+1 or you're a full-time student. The other are the full-time non-4+1 student. The other thing is, let me just state this, and I don't know, we haven't said it yet. If you're a junior and you think you want to do the 4+1, but you're not exactly sure you can commit to the entire +1 year, you can apply to be accepted into the 4+1, take graduate courses in your senior year, and then just not go on for your +1. There's no cost to it, meaning if you decide you want to apply to it and experiment with the program, but for some reason in your +1, it's just not going to work out. Don't let that dissuade you from applying, right? Meaning you don't know what you don't know in your 5th year. You know, maybe you might be looking for a job. You're like, well, what if I get a job and I don't want to stay in grad school or this or that? My advice is apply to it, hopefully be accepted, take your graduate courses as a senior. So if you decide you want to continue on, you have the ability to continue on, okay? So there's no cost if you decide that you want to back out. We've actually had a student, Jessica Croak, who was a 4+1 student, really one of our top performing undergraduate students. She did the graduate courses, decided, what did she take, 1 or 2 years off?
Yeah.
But she got a full-time job right out of her undergrad, which is a great problem to have, right? And just decided she could not commit to a heavy load of classes. So she took a year off and now she's coming back. And actually, did you still honor her scholarship?
We did.
Yeah, so very generously, the Office of Graduate Admissions still honored her scholarship that she had already been awarded, which was actually very
Yeah, the flexibility of this, I think, is important for you to know. So, I mean, you're getting essentially 2 free classes. As long as you're admissible, you take those 2 free classes. There's no commitment to us whatsoever.
Well,
So,
they're not free. There's just no
Yeah.
additional charge, right?
yeah, there's no additional charges for them, but we're not charging you a grad tuition rate
Right.
for that. And you're paying a flat tuition at undergrad. So if you're at 15
Exactly.
credits and taking 18, it is purely free coursework.
That's
at that
actually a good point, actually.
So really, you're getting 2 classes, and those are graduate credit that will be transcripted here. So that's the other thing. When you graduate, say you get a job, you can continue in an online fashion if you want to. We've had students do that where, you know, like in Jessica's case, she had to stop for a while. But if you chose to, you could just continue, be a police officer during the day, and you're taking classes online. So you can just continue your degree and even stretch it out over a couple of years if you have to and not be full-time. We'll still honor the commitments we've made to you as far as scholarships and financials and other things. The other thing is, and we're not advocating that you do this, but you're gonna have 6 graduate credits that are transcripted from here. We're a regionally accredited institution. If you have to pick up and move, and we've had a few students that got a job in California or they went down to DC because they got a federal job, your credits, you can take and transfer them into another program. So these are graduate credits that it's just free, you know, as long as you do well, these are free credits that you can take anywhere that you want to do anything later on. So it's a good opportunity for you to kind of test the waters, but also have something tangible that you can take with you to somewhere else. And they're going to count.
And I'll give you another scenario because I don't think anybody would ever want to leave Roger Williams and go anyplace else, all right? But let's think you want to switch programs, right? You decide I'm doing a Master's of Criminal Justice, but you know what? BU has a great program in, I don't know, management studies or, you know, they have a program that all of a sudden based on your career path, you decide you want to go to another university because you will not find a better Master's of Criminal Justice program than here, right? So those again can be transcripted as potentially elective courses for another program. You have a lot of flexibility of how to leverage those credit hours, a lot of different ways. So again, I'm not going to go over this just because it's really not applicable to most of the students here. Again, for those students that decide, this is actually one of our former, actually I was chair of that master's thesis. This is Melissa Francesco, who now actually has a very high level job with state of Rhode Island right now. I just saw her name on something a couple of weeks ago. But again, you know, you could do a master's thesis. Master's thesis would be one of those experiences where you want to do original research to take a deeper dive into a topic area of your interest that typically involves collecting and analyzing data under the mentorship of a faculty member. Now, a master's thesis is not only if you want to go to a PhD program, but if you have an appetite to do research, and that's really what this is about. I will tell you that if you do a master's thesis, even if you decide to not go to a PhD program, it still will enhance skills and abilities that will immediately translate to the work world. So a master's thesis is not just about a research experience. It's about a professional experience, okay? So again, that's one of those conversations we can have. You know, you would primarily have that with me if you were interested in exploring that. And again, you can use this as an opportunity to explore any area of interest. Here's some example of elective courses that we have. We always have anywhere from 2 to 3 elective courses every semester, so there's no shortage of elective courses. We have not had any problems with students getting enough courses or having enough available access to courses to graduate. We always run a full gamut of courses. And again, as Marcus had said, some of our students have used some of these public administration courses also as elective courses. And this is the course I was talking about here, grant writing and management. One of those classes that seems very dry, and I assume it might have an element of being a little bit dry, but is probably one of the most important courses any graduate student could take. Eligibility. So in terms of the 4+1, again, for our junior students, there's no major sense of urgency, but what I will tell you is we really like to see applications in by January, early January. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is for us to be able to, in advance of when you're with your advisors and registering for the fall, that in that spring, mid-March, right, when registration opens. So we want you admitted by that time as a junior so that you're planning those 2 classes, well, really your fall class, so you have enough space in there. And I think that's another important thing, regardless of what class year you are, and I know there's freshmen and sophomores here, if you're thinking about this option, make sure your advisor knows that that's on your mind. So as you're planning out your class schedule, make sure you're leaving 2 free electives in your senior year so that you can block these in. Otherwise, you're taking them as extra credit. So now you might have a 15 credit load that you have to do for your undergrad. And then you're like, oh, well, I'd like to do the 4+1. So now I have to take 18 credits just to do that. If ideally you could get within that 15 credits if you planned early enough.
And then for most students as the juniors, if you are accepted into the 4+1, you will be transferred to my advising load. It just becomes more seamless if we make sure that we know that you're a 4+1 student, and we advise you accordingly. But quite frankly, if you really, there's a lot of good reasons why students would want to keep their other advisors. So if you really have a burning desire to keep your existing advisor, no harm, no foul. This is not personal. We'll do what's in your best interest. So again, you apply in your junior year and you start the process there, all with the intention of having the decision made for your senior year. Again, in terms of the preferred application deadlines, sort of you see here, March 1st. Again, folks, I'm going to ask you as soon as possible. And the big thing too is for the dates, don't think of the dates as the hard date. The date is when you can get your professors to write you letters, right? So if you know that your application is due March 1st, I'm telling you, people that are writing your letters, ask them January the 15th. Give people a good 4 to 6 weeks to prepare letters of recommendation. I can tell you from experience that we all get hit with a lot of letter requests at the same time. And, right, wrong, good or bad, letters of recommendation are another thing to do, right? So if you're looking at a crunch time, sometimes students will say, hey, can you give me an answer? Can you give me an answer? And Courtney, unfortunately said, we're waiting on letters, Don't put people in a position where you back them into a corner and say, well, I need it by next week, right? If there's a delay in your letters, come and talk to me, talk to Marcus, talk to Courtney. We're very reasonable people, but the point is to plan accordingly. Now in terms of the 4+1, we really like to see 3.0 as a minimum grade point average to be accepted into the 4+1. If you are in a situation where maybe you had a rough start to your freshman year, you got sick in a semester, various things happen that make raw GPA scores complicated, come and talk to me. This is really not about a gatekeeping exercise. We just want to make sure that the students that start the 4+1 program are ready to hit the ground as a graduate student in the fall of their senior year, okay? Because it is a lot more work. I think you'll find on average, graduate courses are tougher than undergraduate. There's no doubt about it, but the biggest thing is the workload. much more reading, much more writing. All right, so you just have to be able to balance all of that. But if there's any questions, talk to Courtney, come and talk to myself. We're really, I was gonna say we cast a wide net, but I wanna be clear. We cast a wide net to make sure that we are as equitable in our admissions, but set people up for success. It doesn't do anybody any good to have a student that's not ready to start grad school. In terms of the application, we will waive, and Marcus and Courtney have decided to waive the application fee, which is great. So there's no cost to apply. We can get directly the transcripts here, so you don't even, right? They don't even have to send their transcripts, correct?
No,
we'll do it directly. The letters of intent, you really, again, we're not looking for your life story. So a good 2-page, 3-page most letter of intent. But what you want to think about first, it's really about you being reflective on why you want to be in graduate school. How does graduate school fit into your life plan? Not only from communicating that to us, but really figuring this out in your own mind, right? What role, this isn't a 5th year of college. Don't make a mistake of thinking of grad school as just another year of college. Graduate school is different, and it should be different. And you need to figure out how that fits into your life, plan. So Marcus and Courtney have several prompts up here to sort of have you thinking about what your letter of intent should include. We do also ask, again, 2 professional letters of recommendation. Again, we mean that in terms of either professional, but really faculty too, okay? For you all as the 4+1 students, I'm gonna tell you, letters of recommendation from our faculty here carry a lot of weight. So even if you're a freshman or sophomore now, you should be thinking about your performance in the classroom in such a way that when you go ask Professor Engvall or Professor Kuhn or Dean Brownson for a letter of recommendation, that they can attest to your capacity and the likelihood of you performing at a high level in graduate school. But those letters are probably the most difficult thing we have getting in on time to make sure that your application is complete, and obviously your current resume. I think this is usually your part anyways. I just kind of wait, go on. No, you know what? I think I just kept going. So go ahead. Why don't you talk a little bit about the application?
Well, one thing you'll notice that is not on the list of things that we require is the GRE. So that's one thing that as you look at any other graduate programs, they may ask you to take the graduate records examination. It's basically the SAT for grad school. It sucks. So, if you can go to a program like ours where you don't have to take it.
I've done it.
Yeah, it's not a pleasant experience, but, and actually Courtney just spent 6 hours sitting on a GRE workshop today, and it didn't look too fun, did it? So if you are applying online, actually, we just switched systems, so we actually don't have a fee at all at the moment. So, but once that gets going, we're going to waive all application fees. So if you get to a point where a fee is being asked of you, contact our office. We'll give you the most current code for you. We were waiving them during COVID anyway for the folks that were impacted by everything going on. So you can apply online on our website. If you're a junior now, this is the time to start really thinking about that. Even if you get your app form in, you don't have to wait till your letters are done and all that stuff. Submit your form, so at least that shows interest to us, and we can let Dr. Brown know that you're coming and you're interested. And then we'll be getting your other materials. One funny story about the transcripts, I actually have a FedEx envelope that I saved in my office. I told you this story, right? Yeah. And the student requested an overnight transcript. It was one of our own students, like you guys, just went over to the registrar and they were panicked because they were up against the deadline. So they requested an urgent transcript request that got FedExed to our office. We're 2 buildings down on campus. It went to the FedEx office in Springfield, Mass, and came back to us the next day. So, don't do that. She paid like $50 to have that done. So don't do that. We'll get you transcripts for you. Beyond this, and you can actually skip this portion because it's just one application right now, you're going to indicate your term. It's very easy. Anything like your resume, even your letters of recommendation can be emailed to us because the faculty are here. So if they just feel better emailing it to one of us, we can take that. That's no problem. Same with your resume and your personal statement. So you can send that over to us as well. Quickly about the financial piece. I mentioned that many of the students take federal loans to support their education. Some of you have probably taken federal loans in your undergrad. Similar to, you might have seen a direct loan or a Stafford loan or an unsubsidized or even a subsidized loan in your undergrad. This is the same program, it's just you get more money. The difference is when you fill out the FAFSA as a grad student, you're not putting your parents' information on there anymore, so it's just you. So essentially the feds see you as poor because most of you don't have income. So you're gonna get $20,500 in that program. This actually has dropped to 5.3, I think, this year. So one of the nice things about the grad loans, they've actually dropped in interest, which is a good thing, and hopefully they'll stay that way. So you can borrow up to $20,500 there, and then you can borrow up to what we call the cost of attendance, which you've probably seen in undergrad. It's a really ugly number. But that's basically a cap so that you're not buying cars with your loan money. But we basically give you enough money to pay for your food and housing and other expenses that you have while in school. You don't have to take that, but it's available to you. So you'll see in your aid package, if you've got scholarships, they'd be listed alongside both the federal direct on-sub loan and then the PLUS loan. But notice your parents aren't part of the PLUS loan anymore either if you've taken a PLUS loan in undergrad. Now, in full candor, some of you may go and work for police departments or others that will pay for your degrees, or they'll give you a portion of your tuition. So if you're going out into the workforce at all right after graduation, there may be some options for that. But again, some of these jobs, you might be better off having a master's going in anyway. So especially the federal level to open up opportunities. So there's a lot of reason to continue this going forward, but there are some tuition remission programs that you'll see out there. And as I mentioned, there are scholarships for all of you that come in with a 3.3 or higher GPA. And you can stay connected with us. One thing I'll just mention, and we can open up for questions, and actually I'll pull it up for anybody on Zoom. Please ask any questions you have in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them for you. But one thing that Professor Romano didn't mention is, candidly, the program is full, which is a good thing. We have a lot of interest in the program. We have external students that are like you that are coming in full time. We have a lot of police officers and other practitioners that are coming in. And then we, of course, have all of you. Part of that growth has been in the 4+1, which is great. But as Professor Rana was saying, the earlier you apply, the better, because we can make sure that your slot is held for you. And if we admit you, we're committing to holding that spot in the program for you. If you get too close to that deadline, we can't promise that on February 1st or March 1st, when we have, that we'll have slots for every single student. So the sooner you indicate your interest and we get you admitted, the better.
For the first time ever, we've actually closed classes. So the last 2 to 3 years has been an area of substantial growth. And again, the biggest struggle is those last minute applicants that we get processed, but I just can't accommodate class requests. So that's where the early application and admissions is really important. So I guess that's the presentation part. Any question part?
Sorry, we don't have the pizza part this time.
I know we normally have pizza, and listen, I'm motivated by food, so I'm really disappointed. Marcus, can you bring up in the Brady Bunch view?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Maybe stop the presentation. We can see all those students.
If you guys want to unmute too, I think you can. I didn't block you from being able to.
Still do the gallery view again.
There we go. We've got the chat open if anybody has any questions.
Any questions? We cannot be that thorough.
We covered a lot.
Questions.
Did we miss anything, Cora, you can think of?
Online students, any questions? Why don't you show your videos? Come on. I had a student in my last class that she live streamed it and decided she wanted to lay in bed during class. I said, that's not going to happen. Get out of bed. Nothing. Yeah.
Those 2 graduate classes that you would take senior year, do they apply as credits for your undergrad too?
Absolutely. So they're double counted. So that's what Arcus was saying. The earlier, what you want to do, in the classic sense, most criminal justice students will use those 2 graduate courses as meeting criminal justice undergraduate elective requirements. So they'll take like criminal justice 501, which is overview of the criminal justice system, as one of their 3 undergraduate criminal justice electives. If you've taken all of your criminal justice electives, you can also use them as university-wide elective classes. So that's where when Marcus says you're not paying anymore or you're getting them free, it's because we're double counting it. It's meeting your undergraduate requirement and your graduate requirement. So it's counting both sets. That's a great question. Anybody else?
So, if we are sophomores, so we have to wait until next year to like apply and everything.
Correct. Yep. So you'll apply in the spring of your junior year, maybe late fall of your junior year.
We may open the app a little sooner, but
Yeah.
we'll let everybody know of that if we decide to do that.
And really, who's that? IN. There's just no rush. It's really not about, it's less about not wanting sophomores to apply and just that there's just no rush, right? You know, you want to get as many of those undergraduate courses underneath your belt. You want to know, sort of get a better sense as to what your plans are. And then just take those. I mean, it is really designed for you to take the courses as a senior anyway. So there's just no rush. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have, for the 2 letters of recommendation, they don't have to, do they have to just be, like, justice studies?
No, of course not.
Or any-
Yep. I mean, your best faculty are in justice studies, of course. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. But of course, you can get them from there. We have June Speakman that very regularly writes letters, Dave Moskowitz, Ann Tate. I mean, people from across the university.
You're also not required to do only faculty.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want to have at least one of them faculty, but if you've done an internship or you're
Yeah.
working, get a supervisor. That's
Absolutely.
great, especially if you're going into the field to find out how your work ethic is in a professional setting. That's a great.
Yeah, I would say at least one of those should be a faculty member. There was a question online?
Yeah, sorry. It's more of like a personal question where I'm trying to figure things out, but I'm looking into doing a semester in DC, and I'm not sure if that's feasible because that would be the fall of my senior year.
So what I will tell you is that it is doable, because how we could do it is, I would say conventionally, our +1s are seniors taking courses. Most of our required classes are hybrid. And I would encourage you to take them as hybrid, which is a week in class, week online. However, those hybrid courses can also be taken 100% online. So we would just work out an agreement that it's actually perfect for you, because you could be in DC doing your internship, taking your graduate course also. And that's why that flexibility becomes really important. And quite frankly, that may be the first time I've had that question. And that's something great to put on our radar, that's the advantage of the flexibility that we have baked into the system.
And they can do that course synchronously, right? So
Absolutely.
like this, log in live.
I believe all of our required classes are synchronistic, which means that they're live streamed. And just to give you sort of a sense, Kayla, they're almost all at night, usually from 6:30 to 9:30. So it wouldn't normally, you know, they're one night a week, 3 hours. Okay, so yeah, I think it would offer you a lot of flexibility. And if there's any further questions about that, like you know something about the program or this or that, you can also follow up with me over the phone or over Zoom.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any graduates in the program that ended up graduating in December? The undergrads?
Yeah, it's a weird year because there's Porter Hunt. There's some people that are finishing their undergraduate early because, you know, how we had that big push for summer classes last summer. They ended up taking a couple of summer classes they weren't originally. So there's 2 or 3 students that are finishing a semester early. So we're jumping into the grad program a semester early.
Okay. Yeah, so that's why I raised that. If anybody, I mean, especially those of you that are younger, if you're accelerating your undergrad at any point, if you graduate in December, we're not going to make you wait till September to get started.
That's a good point, because there, again, as I was saying to you, there's some grad programs that are what we call cohort-based. And they really want you to stay with a group and to matriculate through the program in a certain way, in a certain sequence that's kind of constraining. There's rarely a scenario that we can't accommodate. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's really not that complicated either, but we can make it happen.
And effectively, I guess that tailing junior, first semester senior, which would be a spring, we could get you in your first class in the master's in the spring there. So you're doing spring, fall, and then.
Yeah, the only thing I don't know, and you probably, well, I don't know anything about student loans. I don't know how student loans factor into that if you're a senior in the fall, but you're a grad student in the spring. I don't know if that.
They can change, you can actually change your FAFSA, just like a flip of a switch,
Okay, I didn't know
basically,
that.
and we can get you the same aid, because the aid is based on semester. So, so what would happen is instead of 20,500 for the year, you would get basically 10,250 for the spring semester as a grad student. So your aid would kind of change a little bit. Your aid is definitely gonna be different from undergrad. I get that question a lot because people are like, can I just continue what I'm doing with undergrad? Undergrad, from a federal mandate standpoint, regulatory stuff, it stays undergrad. So we can't do all the same grants or scholarships and all those calculations that you have for undergrad. So your aid, whether you start in the middle of the year or the end of the year, will shift to grad, and we'll calculate that based on what's available to you as a grad student. But again, if you get a scholarship from us at the graduate level, we'll figure that out. I mean, I know Jessica's case, for example, just based on how she had to spread things out as now a working professional, we split her scholarship up over, I think, 3 terms rather than 2. We traditionally would do fall and spring, you'd get half each semester. But in her case, we spread it out just to make sure she got the full benefit.
And what I hear about this is we're committed to doing our best to do the right things by students. As your circumstances change, we're going to be flexible and you're responsive and to try to make it work, right? And that's what we've done with Jessica. That's what we've done with other students. Because again, the big thing is you don't know what you don't know. Why should you know, right? So it's really, I don't want you applying to the 4+1 because you're bored, right? I mean, I want you to apply with the intention that you're going to get your master's degree here. But if you're really thinking, you know what, I'm 51% sure I'm staying for my full master's degree, there is no cost beyond workload of applying to the program, being accepted, and starting your graduate career now.
And our goal too, and I know Sean mentioned it earlier on, is that we're not holding a GPA threshold as a gatekeeping activity, I think is how you referred to it earlier. Our goal is to make sure you graduate. We want you to graduate and get a good job or get onto a good PhD, whatever that is. And if we feel like at the beginning, you're already set up at a disadvantage for whatever reason, and you have a GPA that maybe is not proving that you're going to be successful in the program, it's not the definite no or anything.
Right.
We're just trying to help students to make sure that you graduate and have a successful time here. We're not, and I know I speak for Sean and I and the rest of us, we don't think it's fun when you give us tuition for a semester and you disappear. We're not like, yeah, we got the semester with the tuition out of it. That's not our goal. Our goal is for you to graduate. At the end of the day, money is secondary to the rest of all this stuff. So we're not trying to just collect tuition and hope, good luck. Our goal is ultimately to make sure that you're happy, you have a good, satisfactory, and productive time here, and you get a great job. And we know that one of the happiest calls that we get is when somebody calls us 5 years later and said, going and doing that master's was the best thing I ever did because I got this job out of it, or I networked with these folks and got into a great PhD. So we want to help you ultimately.
Any other questions? Online students, come on, there's got to be some more questions. All right, that's it, right?
All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
everybody.
Thanks for
Thank you,
logging in.
students, for live streaming in. Have a good night, everybody.